Welcome to the hit podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. As always, we're dropping into your feed on Tuesdays with what I hope are awesomely curated, bite-sized, digestible conversations going on in the space. Today's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions, and without any further ado, let me bring in Sue Bendavid. Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Super excited to have you out. You are an attorney that we have not only worked with, but just from a reputation standpoint, we were talking a little bit off air, and I was like, I really want to make sure I can get Sue Bendavid in this chair. So I'm so excited to have you out here. And as you know, new year, new rules, new laws. Right?
New Year's, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Yes, yes. So let's bring the audience into the conversation right away. And if you don't mind, real quick, just to give me the quick high level, who's Sue?
Who am
introduce
I?
me. That's right.
Well, I've been doing it for 33, almost 34 years now, practicing law. Been a long time. I work at Lewitt, Hackman, and Encino. I'm the chair of their employment law department. So we have a whole team, and that's all we do is defend companies, management, and counseling, litigation, individual claims, class action lawsuits, and that horrible PAGA, which is a law that most people know about nowadays. So all we do is represent companies and
Is this
management.
the one that people, anyone listening driving, just swerve? It's like,
yes,
PAGA!
yeah. Well, if you know what it is, it's because you've been burned. So
Yeah, right on. Well, I think I appreciate the quick background just so that everyone knows. Hey, listen, we've got a real wealth of knowledge. Again, thank you so much for being here, sitting in the chair for us. And I, if you don't mind, I'd like to just get right into it.
Sure.
New year, new rules, new laws, brief overview, right? Disclaimer, not legal advice sort of a thing, but just to kind of give people a heads up or a quick conversation starter. What's going on in the year now?
There's a lot going on. The legislature has been pretty darn busy. So those of you who are doing personnel handbooks, employee personnel records, you're going to have to change policies and really think about some changes effective January 1. I know that this is
a week into the new year sort of a thing.
Week into the new year.
They say, listen, if you didn't do it already, now's the best time to do it.
Now is the best time to do it. That's right. So what's new? There's a bunch that's new. One is, paid sick leave is going up. And it used to be the state of California had a 3-day, 24-hour rule. Mm-hmm. Now it's a 5-day, 80-hour rule. So a 40-hour rule rolls over to 80. So that's a big change.
Yeah.
So if you have a policy and a handbook, that has to be changed, literally effective
January
1.
9 days ago, yeah.
Then there's a rule that is actually really requires employers to take action. Anybody who signed a non-compete in California that is not valid, you have until February 14th to send them a note.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. That's right, to say that it's void. Yeah. And otherwise, it can create a whole host of problems.
So proactively, they have to send a note out.
Proactively, and not just if you happen to have signed.
Can they put it on like a Cupid card that says will you be my void non-compete?
Isn't that crazy? You really have to write it individually per employee, former employees, anybody hired or anybody who has one after January 2022.
Or what?
Or potentially it's a violation of the law.
That's outrageous. How do you even hunt those people down?
Last known address.
Wow.
Send it out to the last known address.
And then probably keep a copy that you sent it?
Keep a copy, keep proof. Make sure you send it. I would send it by email, regular mail, FedEx, some sort of proof.
Tweet, X, or whatever they call it.
Send it out. So we're working on a bunch of that right now because it's a very short window until that date. Other things their employers have to put together now, most employers, a violence prevention plan.
Okay.
And this is not a one and done. This is not easy. This is a significant program where you have to train your employees. You got to keep records. You have to keep logs. You have to. Each employer is going to be a little different.
Yeah. And who does this apply to?
It applies to almost every employer.
Wow.
Some employers have their own laws that apply to them, healthcare and what have you. But almost every employer now has to have a violence prevention plan.
Is that state
workplace.
or federal?
It's state.
Okay, so in the state of California.
State of California.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So it's going to take a lot of work for people to put this together.
Yeah.
And it, like I said, it has to be spelled out. You have to have training. You have to have designated people. You have to have record keeping. If there's an incident, there has to be a log. Then it's what are you going to do if something happens?
Is this building off something that's existing, or are many employers going to have to start this from scratch? Are there templates? Or
we hope that the state will give us some templates.
Okay.
There probably will be templates sold from different organizations who are doing this as a part of their business.
This feels like as good a time as any to plug you, by the way. So if people want to reach out,
Yeah.
are you guys going to be able to help them with templates?
Yeah, we're working on it.
Okay.
We are definitely working on it. So thank you for that.
Oh, of course.
So it's kind of a big deal, and people need to really keep that in mind. So that's one.
Yes.
Another one. Then what comes to mind? There's so many, by the way.
Right. I'm like, I wanted to do this episode, but now I'm like, what? Can I just bury my head in this?
Yeah. Well, what I'm talking about is really a 2-hour speech.
I know. I know. Thank you for
drill down into a couple of minutes. Something else that's a new law that's starting in January is this rebuttable presumption law. And what this means is if an employee engages in protected activity of a certain kind, in other words, they complain that their wages were discriminatory,
Sure. Okay.
certain activities under the labor code, and within 90 days after that protected activity, there's now adverse action. They're fired, they're demoted, something happens. The law now says it's because of the protected activity. It's a presumption that the employer now has to rebut. So normally, I'll back up real quick. Normally, in a lawsuit, the person who sues, who is the plaintiff, has the burden of proof.
Right.
They have the burden of proving beyond a preponderance of the evidence, 50% and a feather. With this presumption now, the burden shifts to the employer to prove that their termination.
So if an employee complained about XYZ that's protected, that person now has a 90-day golden calf window where you can't do anything. And if you were going to fire, demote, do something anyways, you kind of need to be super duper careful and or be able to prove, like you said, that you didn't do it for that reason.
That it was unrelated to whatever their protected activity was. Correct. Which really boils down to documentation, right? Employers need to document. If you're about to fire somebody because they weren't performing, the non-performance should be documented.
Sure.
It is HR 101.
Right.
But we see employers mess up in this area all the time. It's like, I always get those calls. Hey, I wanted to fire this employee, and then they walk in, and next thing you know, something happened. Yeah, something happened, right? And I said, did you document it? Well, not really.
Well, thought about it.
Thought about it, thinking about it. There's that old rule. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
That's right. Yeah.
I have a corollary to that. If it's not written well, please don't put it in writing.
Yeah. No, that's a good point too. Yeah, that's right. You've got, because that, honestly, in some ways that can do you worse, right? Do you more harm.
Yes. Yes.
You look like you have like 1,000 examples.
I was on the phone prior to being here today, and yes, that was like, oh my God, I wish you hadn't sent that.
Yes.
So be careful what you write. Emails, texts, instant messaging, Slack messages, postings.
What do they say? It's like every single thing you write, picture like this really monotone judge reading it in court to like a court
or
report.
worse, blowing it up on a big PowerPoint in front of the jury.
Yes,
definitely.
No, oh gosh, there's so many minefields. Well, okay, so we've talked about a couple horribly terrifying monsters under the bed. I assume that the state of California and or any federal rules, they weren't done.
We're not done. There's a lot more that's out there. Of course, minimum wage goes up. It's going up, and
to what? 16?
16 for the state.
Yep.
But the city and the county and all sorts of
cities
Los
Angeles specifically,
city of LA, county of LA, as well as cities up and down the state of California have their own minimum wage.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the minimum wage doesn't depend on where the employer is. It depends where the employee is working.
Right. And post-COVID, people scattered to the wind, right?
There you go. So if people are working at home, they could be in the city of LA, even if your office is outside. Yeah. And so they get the higher dollar amount. Yeah. Or if they're working up in San Francisco or the Bay Area, again, the higher dollar amount.
And there's the whole Healthy San Francisco thing, just PSA on that from a health insurance standpoint. Yeah. So each of these different cities, counties, fiefdoms have their own little rules that you need to know.
Right. And so I always joke that, if you think you can get away with $16 an hour and you're paying a driver in city of LA who's outside the city, but they're driving, if they work 2 hours within a particular work week within the geographic boundaries of the city, they're in the city. Yeah. And they need to get paid the city's rate. So what's going to happen is the wages are going to go up across the board for everybody because compliance is compliance. We need to make sure everybody's in compliance. So they're going to do the minimum that satisfies all the local rules.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's best practices. Yeah.
We're still seeing a ton of mistakes on wage and hour issues.
Sure.
So if I had to say today, still the two areas of the law that we're still seeing violations, it's wage and hour, meal breaks, rest breaks, overtime, record keeping, which triggers all those potential penalties is on the one hand. And then the second is managing employees in terms of their leaves, their the FMLA, the CIFRA, the disability leaves, the workers' comp, pregnancy, all of that. Those are the two areas that I see employers still struggling in terms of their compliance.
Yeah, well, stay tuned to the HIT podcast when we have Sue Bendavid back out, specifically to talk wage and hour and specifically to talk leave management. Today's topic of the sort of like legal update, I guess, so to speak. Is there any other kind of big nuggets you want to make sure that the audience gets to hear about?
There's some rules about criminal background checks. Okay. Though some regulations came out that require very specific steps to be taken before you decline someone employment. And so basically if you conditionally offer someone employment subject to them passing a background check, you get that background check, you can't just say, oh, you have a conviction, you're fired. It's the whole process of assessing it, giving them an opportunity to respond, then reassessing based on what they said, then making a determination, then communicating the determination. So there's all sorts of rules, both city and state now.
And do they need to offer that conditional offer before they can do the background check?
Definitely. They should not. Even if somebody volunteers that they have a criminal background, you need to put up your stop sign and say, no. Let's first talk about your skills, your abilities to do the job, then conditionally offer. Don't put them to work until the background check is completed and you've done the process. Do the conditional offer, get all the forms signed, get the authorization, do the background check, and then this whole process of assessment and reassessment, only then can you rescind the offer if you can satisfy all the rules. So it's big process. So that's new too.
If someone gets into that space, that's call sue territory, right? Where they go, golly gosh, I had this person, I gave the conditional offer, I got back the background check, and yeesh, I don't like it. Can you talk me through how to do the assessments and things like that?
And definitely, there's some definite markers, things that you need to look at, and procedures in writing that need to be done and followed so that later on, if you do decide to rescind the offer, you can show compliance with with these regulations and all the steps that need to be taken. And this is both City of LA and now the state both have all of these processes in place.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I hesitate to ask, what else? what else on the list?
Oh gosh, there's just so many things. A lot of We're going to see there's another law in the books where public prosecutors will now have the ability to prosecute employers for wage and hour violations. So you have employers could really be attacked from the labor commissioner, public prosecutors, the employees themselves, all focus on the wage and hour. So that's why I'm saying if you're not in compliance with keeping track and meal breaks and rest breaks and overtime and all of that, it's really do an audit.
Yeah.
Check what you're doing, make sure that you're in compliance.
Yeah.
See if you can pass the test, right? Because I will look at records and I'll be able to spot when I see violations. So if everybody's taking their lunch breaks exactly from 12 to 12:30, 12 to 12:30, 12 to every single day,
unrealistic, right?
It doesn't look right. Yeah. Maybe it's true. Maybe it is true, but I need to ask the question.
Yeah. Right? Show me that security footage.
What's really going on here? Yeah.
Oh, so interesting.
Yeah. And the problem with all of these laws for employers is, first of all, compliance is a lot cheaper than litigation. And when you're in litigation, when there's a lawsuit or a claim from a government agency, the penalties are really high. Yeah. And the fees and the interest and the penalties, they stack. Yeah. And so you could have a low violation translate to a pretty high claim dollar-wise. Yeah. Yeah. So,
and that's often, at least in my limited experience, that sometimes that's even driven by an employee who's like, I was fired for, they don't like me and I was wrongful termination. And the attorneys are like, maybe not. Let me see your pay stub, right? I mean,
oh my God. I literally have plaintiffs' attorneys who have told me that almost verbatim. Yeah. They call it, fishing in a barrel. Yeah. The claim came to me to claim he was wrongfully terminated, but I didn't think he had a case. But then I asked him for the pay stubs and there you go.
Yeah. So as an employer, like you're saying, not only is compliance cheaper than all the consequences, but if you think your employees aren't going to raise an issue, the attorneys might be the ones proactively tapping them on the shoulder in some cases, right? To let them know.
For sure. So there's a lot of laws that came out this year that really were telling employers you need to update your handbooks.
Yeah.
I've mentioned some of them.
Yeah.
Reproductive loss is a new leave law.
That's right. Unpack that for me. Right? That's folks that maybe they had a miscarriage or something along those lines.
Right. So there's that. That's a new law that allows people to have time off.
What does that look like, if you don't mind unpacking that a little bit further for me?
So it's a 5-day. It depends on the circumstances, but generally it's up to 5 days.
Yeah.
It could be more depending on if there's multiple events in a year.
Right.
They can use their vacation. They can use their sick. There's no retaliation. There's confidentiality requirements. So
what all does it apply to?
What do you mean?
So it's like if folks had a miscarriage, if folks failed to get an adoption go through, or isn't it like it's broader than that? No.
Yes, it's broader than it is any form of reproductive loss.
Right. Okay.
Right. And the reproductive loss is specifically defined in the statute.
Okay.
The primary people who are going to be beneficiaries of this law are those who miscarry, because apparently there's a large percentage, according to the legislature's analysis, of pregnancies that end in miscarriage.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the primary beneficiary of that particular leave law.
Yeah. Gosh, that's fascinating. And sorry, that's a state law, right?
That's a state law.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else we want to touch on before? And again, maybe really quickly, how can folks get a hold of you? Because this is, like you said, this is a 2-hour conversation.
It is
we're putting into a hit podcast.
Yeah. So I'm in Encino.
Yep.
So you want the
absolutely
phone
fire
number?
away, whatever you want.
The phone number is 818-907-3220. I'm definitely findable all over the web.
Yep.
Sue Bendavid. The firm is Lewitt, Hackman in Encino.
Yep.
And I have a whole team of people that work with me. I have associates and clerks. And
so people want to dive further, that's a good way to do that. And maybe just, one last on the way out the door here. Is there anything else we didn't touch on that you want to tell people? Listen, from a 2024 legal update standpoint, again, you can contact me if you want to get deeper, but just while I got your ear, ladies and gentlemen, here's one last thing I want to mention.
Well, I think of all the things that I've mentioned, the front burner is, of course, the paid sick, because that has to be changed ASAP.
Yep. Yesterday.
It has to be on your pay stub, which means people need to proactively get that taken care of so that it shows that you're compliant. And getting that violence prevention plan in place is going to take some work.
Yeah.
People really need to get moving on that if they haven't already. And sending out those notices to people who have non-competes. I think those are the front burner items, really.
Yep. Love that. Happy Valentine's Day. We have a non-compete.
Right.
That's right. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. I look forward to, like I said, potentially getting you back in the chair for some of these deep dives. I know wage and hour is always a major issue. I know leave law compliance is always a major issue. But as far as the brief overview of some of the front burner stuff, I love that term on the legal update.
Literally a snapshot.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have. Join us next week, Tuesday. Join us every Tuesday. And until next week, make this the best weekend.